it's 57 days until election day, but roughly, well, in 2016, 45% of voters voted early. It'll be more this year because of everything that's going on. Um, so some people are already voting. Huge numbers of people will start voting um, about 12 days from now when a bunch of states open up early voting. Um, so everything that happens in the next 2 months reflects on the candidate's chances. Um, and you could say that what happened on Friday with this Atlantic article about Trump saying a bunch of shit about, calling military dead losers and suckers. Um, we've already started that argument where I said a bunch of people have verified it, and you said they haven't, and you said 11 people have said he never said it, yada yada, and I said he's on tape talking about McCain, and anyway, but the deal is that Biden is 7 to 8 percentage points ahead in national polls, and which is double what Hillary was at a similar 2 months before the election. And what happened when with so little time left, it's less what is 100%, bless you, ascertainable, and more what persuades people. What persuaded people in 2016 was when Comey, 11 days before the election, said that the FBI was reinvestigating Hillary and her emails. They say that swung the election 2 percentage points, even though it turned out to be pretty much nothing. I mean, they found no new emails. But it fucking swung anyway. Shit like this.
What? I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
One more thing, and then I'll let you go. We don't know whether these stories about Trump saying bad shit about our fallen troops will move opinion polls because it's Sunday evening and the new polls don't come out until tomorrow morning. But we're in the time of September surprises and October surprises.
Okay. Obviously, it was a hit piece and a lie by a Democrat operative. No evidence for it. Many witnesses saying that he didn't say it. But beyond that, his actual source refuses to come forward. The person that says he heard him say that.
Well, it was 4 sources.
Yeah, they refuse to come forward. I don't care.
That's true. Everybody's still remaining anonymous.
Yeah, and you know what? I have an anonymous source that says you beat your wife every night, Rick. So, to me, that's not proof. Okay.
Actually, but no, I do actually, especially lately. Okay. She likes. All right. She's got really strong calves because she hikes like 4 or 5 miles a day, and. Yes. And I'll take her. She'll lie there. She makes me beat her. I'll go bap on her calves. Mush, mush, punch, punch. And sometimes I'll bap her on the butt. It's but she doesn't mind. So yeah,
I'm reporting you for that. I mean that's life beating. But anyway, I'm just curious since we're in the realm of weird accusations against candidates. Did you hear anything this week about Biden doing anything untoward? Anything at all? Did your media protect you?
There was a thing today. It's not what you're talking about, but one of Trump's social media people tweeted a footage or a picture of Biden in a graveyard and said, "Hey, here's Joe Biden. Moran, we asked him to come over and talk to us, but here he is just meandering around." And um, this was not a successful tweet for Trump's tweeter because it turns out that Biden goes to church, I guess, just about every Sunday, and pays respects to his son who passed away, and that he was at the church where his son is he was leaving that church, passing through the graveyard where his
Yeah.
son is.
Okay. All right. So let me tell you what your media protected you from.
Okay.
It turns out that Biden, there is a Secret Service report. They refuse to release it, but it exists.
So wait,
Um,
how do they? So who found it?
so this was somebody in the Secret Service, and again, this is anonymous, but it's as anonymous as your person. Fox News and various conservative outlets have asked the Secret Service to release this report, and the Secret Service has sort of been evasive, but they didn't deny that it existed. Um, and so I mean, in other words, they haven't. The Secret Service hasn't released the report, but they have indicated that there is a report of some kind, and they have not released it, and they're not going to. So the report is that Biden, when he was vice president, he had a Secret Service detail, and he apparently used to grab the asses and the boobs of the wives of the Marines and Secret Service men when they were in close quarters, and when at one point it got to the point where they used to not allow their wives or girlfriends to get around Vice President Biden, and but it reached a head when a picture was being taken, and Biden was standing next to a Secret Serviceman and his girlfriend, and Biden apparently groped her breast. And the Secret Service man shoved and attempted to hit Biden. And so he had to be reassigned, and this whole thing had to be investigated because, if you take a swing at the vice president, that's a very serious thing.
Okay, so
So
could we,
anyway, so anyway, what?
I want to discuss this further, but we've been going for more than an hour, so I want to take a break and read about it, um, and then we can talk about it because it's
Well,
interesting.
there isn't there. I'll tell you in advance that my accusation is a little bit better supported than yours because the Secret Service has actually been approached on it, and they've sort of indicated that there is a report, but it's not going to get released.
Okay,
And
is
and
there a
but
place that I should start looking, or
well,
can I
you're
just
not.
Google?
You can read about it if you want to, but all my only point. I'm only driving at one point. I'm not saying I have proof that he did it. The only point I'm trying to make is that you heard not one whisper about it because the media protected your candidate from a very serious charge,
Yeah,
and
okay.
yet a nothing little comment that means nothing that Trump is supposed to have said. I've heard about it 24/7. I've heard it every hour for the past 2 days that I've been listening to the radio
Well,
or
okay. So,
watching the news.
all right. So,
So I'm
let's.
just wondering why it is that you didn't hear one word about Biden groping people's breasts and asses, but you heard everything about this. Don't you ever think that maybe you're being misinformed or shielded from bad news about Biden?
Maybe. I mean, the deal is that I curate. Everybody on Twitter curates who they follow, and
Well, so do I. So do I. I don't listen to every left-wing hack out there. I don't listen to CNN.
right? But
I've
like
heard it just
I
through
can't
osmosis.
even if I
I couldn't
wanted to
avoid your
follow
stuff.
Charlie Kirk, I can't because he's blocked me because I said something snarky probably to him like months ago. Um,
Well, I'm just saying this is a
but
this
anyway, but
thing
that
that
just
Trump
brings
is
up.
supposed to. Did you want to take a break?
Yeah, but one sec though, because this brings up a couple points, which is just for the sake of argument. I mean, actually, it's a similar thing where, like, whenever I bring up Obama, you bring up a huge what you consider and what I think a lot of people would consider a huge strategic error, which is taking out Gaddafi, the leader of Libya, without having military in place to prevent Libya from becoming a failed state, which is well, you'd consider that a huge strategic error, right?
Yeah, I bring that up every time, and I'll
But
never stop bringing
you
it
don't
up.
need to go into it. But anyway,
Okay.
it's a symmetrical situation, I think, between for the sake of argument, let's say each thing is true. Trump said shitty stuff about dead soldiers, and Biden grabbed a bunch of butts and titties. Each of these things, there's nothing strategic about either of those things. Each of those things are completely avoidable. Like Obama was trying to do the right thing, and he ended up doing not the right thing. Um, if you believe that and we don't have to argue about that, but anyway, like grabbing tits, that's a complete cell phone. That's a gratuitous act. That doesn't serve any strategic purpose. And calling soldiers losers doesn't serve a strategic purpose. These are things that are like unnecessary, like self owns shit that they didn't have to do that will come back later to bite them in the ass, which um, it's just
Unless, unless you're a Democrat, in which case all of your all the really terrible things that you may have done uh, will be shielded. I mean, you haven't heard a word about it.
yeah, but your
But if
media is
you're,
all
but
over
if
it,
you're,
right?
no,
Breitbart
no, my,
and
no, no,
OANN.
no, no. My point is that I've heard about both stories, but I've heard about yours constantly. I heard one report, I read one article about the ass groping, and and that's a hell of a lot more serious than some sort of quip about the military that is negative, but it's just a sentence.
Well, no, it
Whereas
was a bunch of
grabbing,
them. It was a bunch
yeah,
of different
no,
times.
no, it wasn't. And I have
No,
to
no,
say,
come on.
grabbing.
Like, I mean, we can argue. I mean,
Wait. If I told you I thought the people at Arlington Cemetery were losers, you think that's as serious as grabbing Carol's butt and breasts? You're the lovely Carol? I mean, you'd punch me in the nose if I said that, but if I said that the people in the cemetery were losers, you wouldn't punch me in the nose.
um, well, the deal. I mean, I've had like I myself am didn't do the military, but I've got a bunch of family members who, my dad, my stepdad, my father-in-law, my brother, all, were my brother for 30 years. So like, I don't know, I was offended on Twitter. It's like to have a president that says that shit. And I myself have grabbed before I've before I learned better, I've grabbed asses. Of course, I was young as shit. Like I was fucking
Uh-huh.
13 in one instance, and I was 20 in another instance, and then I learned that that's just not a thing you do. And of course, Biden being 60 something, or even 70, that's not a good thing. But I don't. But anyway, let's take a break. Let me read.
Technically, there's a difference according to our society. You can say, terrible things about American soldiers that are dead, and nothing will happen to you. But if you grab somebody's breasts or boobs, you can actually go to jail for that.
Yeah, that's true.
And yet
All
you
right. So
heard
anyway,
not one word
let's
about it.
take a break, and I'll read about it. Give me 5 minutes. Thanks.
All right, goodbye.
Okay, so I read up on it, and one thing that's interesting you didn't mention, the most substantiated allegation against Biden, and this goes back to 2014, and was even written about in the Atlantic, um, with the same magazine that came out with the latest accusations against Trump. And the Secret Service, some people, according to this Ronald Kessler, who wrote a book, he's a conservative author. He's written 21 books, um, many of which became bestsellers. He talked to Secret Service people about their favorite and least favorite assignments, and apparently some people didn't like working for Biden because Biden apparently liked to go skinny dipping um, at his house.
Yeah,
Um,
he would walk around naked in front of the female security people, and so
Also,
there
they
were
were
some
pissed at
real
him because
questions.
he'd kind of try to do without as many Secret Service people as he could, which pissed him off because that was, putting him at risk. And of course, if Biden gets hurt or killed, because he's, it still falls on the Secret Service, even if he's the one who told him to back off. Um, and then the other stuff about the groping, um, there's Judicial Watch, which is this conservative, activist organization, has filed a subpoena to 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 retrieve a report that maybe existed at one time and may not exist anymore, um, pertaining to the alleged groping. And I couldn't find too much discussion. You know, anyway, that's what I found.
Well, the funny thing about it is if you read the Secret Service's response, what they said was the file you're looking for no longer exists.
Yes.
So it's a very sophisticated way of admitting that there is apparently a file about this, and that's their way of saying, yeah, something happened, but we destroyed the file.
Yeah. Well,
So,
I know now maybe, and I assume the deal is that um, you get rid of the once the files are no longer pertinent. You in the interest of privacy, you get rid of them. You know that.
well, who knows why? It might be that they're Democrats and they don't want to embarrass
No, like
Biden.
like one time.
No, no, that's out of the question. That's
No, no, like
ridiculous.
because I have a personal story. You hate my personal
But
story.
they couldn't possibly keep a tiny little file on a computer somewhere. Now that it takes up too much space.
And it's not the taking up space; it's the privacy. And the deal
Well, yeah, they're yeah.
here I have a very weird personal story. As
All
you
right.
know, I used
Maybe
to
we
like to
can
go.
end on this story.
Okay, I used to like to go back to high school. The first time I went back at age 18, I just wanted to get a girlfriend, and I thought I can't leave high school until I have a girlfriend. And I went back for about 10, 11 weeks and was still unable to talk to girls, and I dropped out. And then 9 years later, I went back one last time, um, because I just wanted a place to think about physics, and definitely did not want a girlfriend because that wouldn't have been ethical. But anyway, what prompted maybe the last trip back to high school was I ended up going to my hometown school in Boulder, and the gym I went to, um, my high school was halfway between my house and the gym. And so I would pass by my high school, I don't know, a few times a week, if that's the route I took. Um, and one time I was walking by, I was in, I don't know, my early 20s. And I walked by my high school and I saw boxes and boxes of, of records just tossed into the dumpster. And the first time I went back to high school, I forged an entire like set of transcripts and everything. So I've been interested um, in high school records and documents. I got I asked for my entire permanent record when I was a high school senior, and then I used that to build a whole fake record when I went back to high school. Um, and so I packed, there were all these documents. Um, and so I hurried home and drove back in my turquoise Pinto and loaded up, I don't know, 6 boxes of these docs that stank because they were old. They reeked of mildew. I brought them home and I went through them, and they were lovely. And I shouldn't have seen them at all. But the deal is, they were the documents relating to all the problem students and the occasional really good student of the classes maybe 2 years before my graduating class. So obviously what had happened was the problem students, they held on to their records a few years longer um, than the regular students, I guess, in case like one of the students really went haywire, like 5 years after graduation, and the FBI came looking for insight into what the fuck was up with this kid. So after 5 years or 6 years or 8 years, whatever, they'd finally the time for dumping these records came, and they got rid of the problem student records in such a way that I was able to get at them. And they were just lovely to read over, to see all the stories and of the kids who were constantly at odds with the school structure, where we've argued about whether cops are mean to black people especially, or whether and you take the point of view that black people just are more crimey. And those same questions were embodied in these files, where once a kid got a reputation as being a bad kid, that kid continued to get in trouble. And there was one vice principal. You know how the vice principal is always the designated bringer of the hammer down on kids, the discipline guy? And we had a vice principal who was a long distance runner, and there were reports of that guy just loved running bad kids into the ground. He'd catch a kid up to no good, and just the kid would take off, and this guy Pat Patton would just run forever until the kid dropped. That
Wow.
was the and anyway, from these mildewy documents, I was able to build myself a whole new permanent, a 40-page permanent record of a kid who just had a lot of trouble. That I became that kid the last time I went back to high school. Um, so anyway,
Well,
that's a long way. The long way to a long time I took to say probably the Secret Service has mandated lengths of time to keep these reports, and then they dump them after
okay.
the.
I wanted to you slipped in a kind of a comment that makes me look kind of awful. Um, I don't, I just want to make this clear. One, I do believe that there are bad cops out there, but two, I do believe that black people have more bad experiences with cops because statistically they have more interactions with cops and statistically commit more crimes. So it's not because I despise black people. I'm just saying it's not a coincidence that they keep
You're
getting
saying it's a
involved
demographic
with
issue to
cops.
some extent.
Yeah, yeah. All right. So anyway,
But wait,
all
there's
right.
another
Well,
argument to be had with that, because
yes.
granting your statistic for the sake of argument, there's a further argument to be had, which is, if black people do commit more crime, why is it that they do? And liberals will say Well, fucking look what's up with the whole history of black people in America, and they have 1/10 the assets. They're subject, to more social disruption than whitey. And I'm just saying there are other arguments to be made that just
Well,
because,
if that's it's a large issue as to why certain groups commit more crime, and we've never really dealt with it. But I actually have a question for you. Why is it that Jews commit less crime?
well, you go, um, um, Willie Sutton was a bank robber in the 30s. Back then, like bank robbers were kind of glamorous. John Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde. The banks were thought of as being kind of evil, and people anyway. So Willie Sutton was interviewed, and and a journalist asked him, why do you rob banks? And he goes, well, that's where the money is. And for Jews, the money or the thing that makes life rewarding is keeping your nose clean, is being a well-behaved little gentleman, because there are pathways to success in life, um, for 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 well-to-do white families, including Jewish families, associated with not fucking up. Um, and then you could argue that these pathways aren't as clear given the position of other races in society.
Why is that,
Jewish.
Rick?
What's that?
Why is that?
Well, because I mean, we've had the argument about whether intelligence is nature or nurture, but Jews have over the past, I don't know, 100 years excelled academically and been overrepresented in the professions, doctors, lawyers, accountants, um, and I'd argue that a lot of it is, there are all sorts of correlations between having an intact family and a middle class or better family, and educational attainment. Um,
Why do you think Jews have more intact families?
um, well, I mean that there are there there's a
It's values, God damn it! It's values. That's what
yeah, but
determines
it's
success or
not just
failure.
okay. If I'll buy values, but it's values reinforced by environment.
Yeah, but America allows freedom of choice, and if
Yeah,
people
but
choose the right
when you
values, they
look at
have a
the
better chance
average
of success.
when you look at the average Jewish family, they are in a better financial position. Now, I don't know if this is always held true, but um, the average Jewish family has much more in the way of resources than the average black family. Um,
Now, my grandparents came over with nothing, and my father didn't come from a wealthy family at all. They were
yeah, but I
anyway.
mean,
Listen,
all right,
that's a
but like,
different
all right, but
subject. I wanted to bring up something that I thought of. I'm sorry. Did you want to go on?
I don't know. We
Go ahead,
don't. I
please.
mean, I don't need to. We don't need to keep having. I don't know. Let's move on.
All right. So actually I realized this today that the Democrats love illegal aliens. They love to have an open border. Um, and I realized today something very, very chilling. And that is that when psychiatrists study society, they find that there's a certain percentage of people in the society, maybe 10 or 15%, whose IQs are too low for them to succeed, to have any real useful function in society. They found this out when they were trying to get soldiers for the military. And they found out that one out of every 6 or 7 people just had to be eliminated from being in the military because they would get other people killed. And so it opened up a study of, well, what we're saying is that there's a tiny, well, it's not tiny, it's something like 10 or 15% of the American population is basically useless, or really does have tremendous obstacles in their way because they're not smart enough to succeed, to function. And I realized that because the Democrats are bringing millions of illegal aliens into the country, the jobs that those very limited IQ people could have done are all taken. So what you used to do with people that had that kind of limitation, and there are millions of them, is you'd say, look, sweep up the sidewalk, clean these dishes. And you needed enough of them to do that. It's a job. It has to be done. Someone has to do the sort of stupid work. So
I've done plenty of stupid work. I've been a dishwasher. I've been a
yeah,
dog shit.
I understand, but there are people that will do that their whole lives. And by the Democrats bringing in millions of illegals, they are making life harder for people that actually had a place in society. They actually had a place before the Democrats did this. So just one more reason to vote Republican.
All right,
And
so I got a
illegal
couple
immigration.
things to say about that. One is that the U.S. population has remained remarkably steady for years now, that we're not really growing at any great rate. We're having not enough babies to replace dead people. So to maintain a steady population, or a population that grows slowly, we need immigrants. That's thing one.
No, we don't. No, we don't. Why do we need to replace dead people?
We don't. Now, if you want, I'm just saying, if you want a population that either stays the same. Now, I think Japan has like a shrinking population.
Yeah, what would happen if we went down a little bit? What difference would it make?
I'm not arguing about that. I'm just saying if you want to have a population that doesn't go down,
well, I
we've been
don't.
relying on.
I don't want that.
Okay, that's fine. We don't have to have that argument because that's a whole other argument I don't want to have.
All right. Okay.
And there are societies like Japan has a declining population. It causes problems because you have all these old people that need care, and then you don't have enough young people to pay for it or handle it. Russia has a declining population because just everything in Russia sucks ass. But there are, I'm sure, countries that have a declining population where it's not creating problems that are too serious. But anyway, that's thing one. Thing two is that one problem with saying that a certain percentage of the population is too stupid is that historically, the people deciding who's too stupid have been huge racists. The history of IQ testing and the history of statistics in the first half of the 20th century is chock full of either overt or unintentional racists. Like people that you wouldn't even expect to be racist were fucking racist. Like the guy who came up with the correlation coefficient, one of the most important statistics in statistics. Racist, motherfucking racist. And the people who wrote the first IQ test, the Army A, which was the first IQ test administered to potential troops in World War I, was fantastically racially biased, including questions like they'd show you a drawing of a hood ornament and ask you what make of car that was a hood ornament for. And the person who wrote the test is like, well, fucking everybody, there are cars every place. Everybody sees cars. Everybody knows which car, which fucking thing on the fucking hood belongs to which make. Packard, whatever. except when it comes to Giuseppe, who's just come over from Palermo. Fucking Giuseppe has no fucking idea. So people from the swarthy countries scored like shit on the Army A. Um, and then it gets into, I'd buy the argument that there are some people who are too stupid to do anything but low-level jobs. But I'm not sure that we are good enough then or now at figuring out exactly who those people are.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I never mentioned race. It's not an issue um, as
But that's
far
the
as
way it
these
fucking
IQ.
worked out. Like Italians, those filthy
I
Italians.
understand.
In
I understand. I understand, Rick. I'm just saying that today, um, according to Jordan Peterson, who's a
Yeah, but no, he's
very
horrible though.
well, he's an eminent psychologist, and he studies tests of personalities.
He
And
was
he said
studying
that
horror.
they can test when they're trying to evaluate people's personalities with modern tests. They can test your compassion, your openness, um, I don't know how what your social
Your EQ, your
intelligence is. Yeah,
emotional.
there are a lot of things they can test, but what he says the most reliable test they've ever come up with to evaluate someone's personality is IQ tests. That even though they have other kinds of tests, in the year 2020, IQ tests are as accurate as we have. Okay, and
Well, you know
we
what I'm going to
know.
say, but well, go ahead.
Well, you may. All right, I'm going to have to spend a little bit of time backing this up. There was a program during the Vietnam War by it was launched by Secretary McNamara, and his idea was that we would increase the number of troops we needed by lowering the requirements of IQ. And this experiment is famous for having gotten thousands of American troops killed. There have been many books written about it, but it's a well documented thing because you tell Joe, stand here and make sure you don't go to sleep because we need someone to keep watch. And of course, Joe would go to sleep and the platoon would be ambushed. Or Joe would have, his IQ was so low that he would accidentally set grenades off or shoot his own troops. So we do know, in spite of your zeal for perfection, we do know that there is a percentage of Americans that we don't have much use for anymore, if we ever did. And what I'm saying is that these people used to have a place in society when we had fewer manual laborers being brought in over the border by the Democrats. I mean, I'm
Right, so
genuinely, I'm not using this, wait, don't interrupt me. I am not using this to score political points. I genuinely feel sorry for these dumb people of every race that used to be able to find work doing very low level things. And it's just, it makes me angry that the Democrats have done this.
all right. Well, the Democrats haven't done this any more than because we've been a nation of immigrants for fucking 2.5 centuries. But anyway,
But not illegal immigrants that we don't need millions of manual labor people against our own interests of our own working
yeah, but I
class.
mean the
We didn't
net
need that.
number of it's a small number, but
No, it's
it's a
it's
small
it's
percent.
about
But
20
anyway, all right.
million
Let's
people.
not have this fucking. Let's talk about the biggest correlation. No, the SAT is essentially an IQ test. You can go online. And you can look up, there are charts that show you that an SAT score of this much taken in this year equals an IQ of this. And it turns out that a lot of schools are dropping. Thousands of schools have dropped the SAT, particularly now because under COVID, it's really tough to find a way to take the SAT. And schools have known for decades that SAT adds no predictive value beyond the rest of the student's portfolio. But it turns out that SAT, the highest correlation between SAT and anything else is between SAT and parental income. That's the strongest relationship. The more money your parents make, the better you do on average on the SAT, which is an argument about intact, affluent family structures and people who grow up to be able to exist in the world. And there's a whole set of backup arguments about this. But anyway, I don't want to argue about that. I will argue this. Two things. One is that thanks to AI and automation, more than fucking undocumented aliens or whatever, that the more shit that automation can do, the higher the fucking tide of shit that, of jobs that used to go to dumb people, the higher the tide comes and washes more and more of those jobs away. So regardless of whether we have illegal immigrants, the smarter fucking our robots get, the more people are fucked if they're not smart or if they're not skilled. And so I guess I agree with you that it's a fucking problem, though I don't agree with you about the source of the problem. But what it means is, as I've argued before, I think it means that you have something like a two-tiered system where you've got minimum basic income for people, and then for people who want to do better than basic, you have aspirational income. You want to get out of your basic fucking life where you can only afford a 60-inch flat screen, then fucking get further education and rise above the basic. That's thing one. Thing two is that you have been arguing, including today, that Biden's a communist who's going to wreck America. And I don't think of Biden as a communist. I don't think anybody reasonable does. And in fact, people on your side don't argue that he's a communist. You more commonly argue that he's a feeble old man who's been taken over by communists because he has no thoughts of his own left in his old noggin. But in any case, I don't buy any of that bullshit. The deal is that I like Joe Biden because he's been a bureaucrat for 47 years. He's been in government for fucking forever. And I want normalcy. I want a return to normal fucking government where crazy shit doesn't happen like 3 times a day. The news cycle is brutal now. And you see it all over Twitter. Other people are like, don't you want a government that you don't have to keep checking on to see what crazy shit they did, as we've had under in the olden times, which means in times before 2017. Because I don't think that the fucking innovations are much going to come from the government. I think the biggest innovations are going to come from fucking science, which is exploding in power. And I want a government that's just going to keep shit normal on a day-to-day basis while science comes in and reshapes the world in a way that I think will overall be positive. Because, I mean, right now we're in the middle of shit where I don't know how much science is even getting done because fucking scientists, I don't know how many people, are they're working from home. Can they do as much science from home? Probably not. if they're,
this week, in the past 20 days, he negotiated.
hold on, we got to have a break.
All right. My response is that I do think that the Trump presidency has been normal. Uh, in the past 20 days, Trump has signed a peace treaty between Israel and two Arab countries and between Kosovo and Serbia, and not a word of it was shared with Rick. Instead, the news media has been terrifying him. I honestly believe that the reason he thinks things are so abnormal is because his media is uh, frenzied in their propaganda against Trump. Everything, instead of saying one word, and I'm certain that Rick didn't hear one word about the peace treaty between Serbia and Kosovo,
I heard like
but
one sentence and I skated right over it.
yeah, but instead he heard all about this lie about what Trump is supposed to have said about the military. He didn't hear anything about the unemployment rate going from 10 to 8.5,
Oh
8.4,
yeah, I heard
except
about that. I told you all the.
except that some of the people were census workers and they were temporary. So your
No, no,
media,
'cause you
Rick,
know what?
wait, wait,
I did like I did
let,
20 minutes of poking around just to see because I wanted to see like, all right, so our unemployment rate was 10 and now it's 8, and I'm like, what was it during the Depression? So like I took the initiative to do some poking around,
yeah,
and
I'm trying to make a point, Rick. We all heard that. We know that.
yeah,
But
but like
but
you're
my
saying that I was like
my
totally ignorant about every
I
fucking
no,
thing.
but, yeah, but what I'm saying is your media has characterized. They didn't say a word about the Israeli peace agreement. They
Yeah,
didn't say a word about the Serbian agreement. The only thing they said about the unemployment record is that some of the jobs are temporary. And
they said a
I
lot
think
more than that. That was the
if
part.
I was if Rick, I heard it too. Okay, I've heard the reports too. I listen to CNN and PBS and I hear what they do. And I'm telling you that this has been a very successful, very good presidency, very normal, a lot of progress in a lot of things. Uh, and you are being brainwashed, and you're not being told the whole truth. You don't realize it, and your nervousness about what's going to happen next is because you're being brainwashed. And if I was you, if you go over the 4 years that we've been talking, all the issues that I bring up every week, all the times I point out that information's been kept from you or you didn't hear something, I would be angry. So many times you've stared at me like a duck that's been hit on the head because you didn't know what I was about to say. And I would be angry if I was you. I would say, you know what? I hate Trump and I hate the things that Lance says. But there is something odd about how I don't know these things he's going to say. Maybe, just maybe, my media is not serving me. And you don't really have to hate Trump as badly as you do, Rick.
All right, so the deal is, so, yeah, but well, you know what? I mean, yeah, our country
Our
was founded.
director is trying to say
Hold on.
something.
All right, so our director said that I believe that our country was founded on Judeo-Christian values, which is yeah true, um, but now it's kind of working according to the principles of science, which is true, except that a lot of our founding fathers were not, you know, like hardcore Christians, and a lot of our founding fathers were super sciencey. Ben Franklin discovered the electron. Ben Franklin was a hardcore fucking scientist. Thomas Jefferson was very sciencey. He came up with all sorts of fucking inventions, and these guys were deists, which is like a very relaxed form of, Christianity, if it's Christianity at all. So, I mean, the values, the Judeo-Christian values were there, but the religiosity was not necessarily there. So, yeah and nah. Um, but the deal is, okay, so I'll half agree with you, Lance, that the fucking press follows the gaudiest gewgaws, the shiniest coins, the most sensational shit. And that means that some of the stuff that you've talked about that Trump has done does get shortchanged, but also because the press just kind of reports without contextualizing and has some other bad habits. As much as they do a disservice to Trump by not reporting some of the shit you just brought up, they also do a huge service to Trump by letting him get away with a bunch of bullshit without, calling him on his tens of thousands of inaccurate, lies. So the press.
I don't think that's true. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry. You finished?
But no, I got one more thing, and the important thing is, and I've been driving towards this all night, which is fucking, it doesn't matter, this fucking peace treaty. It doesn't matter. Hold on, let me tell you. It doesn't matter if Joe Biden, if there's a report that got destroyed that Joe Biden was grabbing butts, because time is up. People are voting, and the shit that catches people's attention. Louis DeJoy there are a bunch of articles today on how he committed the same campaign finance fraud that Dinesh D'Souza was convicted of, that he had his employees. You're limited in how much you can contribute to a candidate personally. So Louis DeJoy had his employees contribute to his candidates, and then he would pay them back via bonuses, which is some illegal shit. But there's no time. He may get prosecuted months down the road when the investigation's complete, depending on who's president months down the road. But there's no time for that prosecution to happen before the election. And there's no time for a lot of shit to happen. So it's all surface shit now. It's all the Atlantic article and about Trump saying bad shit. It's all just fucking September surprises and October surprises. And I guess after everything, I'm happy, when the surprises are at Trump's expense.
All right. Well, you know what? I think we can leave it at that. I think they got their money's worth.
Okay.
So, should we finish up? Is that it?
Yeah, and a reminder, if you'd like to give us the money that you got your worth of, our PayPal address is Lance vs. Rick, Lance versus Rick at gmail.com. And thanks for watching.
All right. Bye.
Good night.